No.
I think we're already live.
Yeah,
Yeah, I
that's
think
true.
like, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, okay. Hi, everyone. Yeah, we're live. We were actually, I mean, you might, find another person here, like interviewing another one. I say you might expect me to look like Antonio, but like in this opportunity, I'm the host, and I gotta say thanks, to Antonio for the opportunity to interview him. Welcome to Droidcast Live.
Thank you, and thank you for accepting to do this. It was very fun in the first episode where I interviewed you, and you told that we should do it the other way around, and here we are.
Yeah,
In the end,
finally,
we found a good excuse to do it.
finally we made it, man. Yeah, it's a pleasure. So the first thing that just to mention, apart from like give everyone a warm welcome to Droidcast Live. I mean, it's you just drop all your questions in the live chat. I'll be checking them out. Here, as you know, Antonio is gonna be interview. The idea is to shoot him with a lot of questions. So don't be shy. It's gonna be fun. And actually, to be honest, I mean, we got to know each other. Antonio, we got to know each other for a long time already, and I think that means 8 years or something like that. I remember, like, well, I was in Spain. We bump into each other in conferences, and you were giving talks, and I was curious. I was, fan number one of you, and
I must say that I knew you before that you knew me because you started doing talks at events before than me. So I was one of those that went to all your talks, but
Oh
you
my
didn't know
God,
at that
man.
point.
Thanks for the compliments. But yeah, anyway, guys, we're here just to ask a couple of questions. I think like the best way to get started is to let Antonio introduce himself, to talk about a little bit of his background, story, childhood. I think the good thing about this podcast is like we can know a little bit more about people, people's backgrounds, but like not in the sense of technology and IT, like hobbies, other things, how we got started in this industry. I think that's pretty interesting because these kind of things, these kind of variables, this kind of, context, really makes us what we are now, how we behave and so forth. So,
Totally agree.
yeah. So yeah, again, welcome everyone, and yeah, Antonio, I will, give it to you and just tell us a little bit of your story. Where you from, where you were, raised, and these kind of things. It's going to be interesting because I don't have much of that background as well. So it's also an opportunity
Yeah.
to me to get to
We
know the
we
other
always end
Antonio.
that we always end
Yeah,
that talking about coding and we forget about that part. But yeah,
exactly.
so I
Yeah.
was born in Madrid, in Spain, the capital of Spain, and I've been living here for my whole life. I haven't worked abroad or studied abroad. I've always stayed here. I'm not a very good traveler, I would say. So my whole life has been here in a town near Madrid, and my childhood was pretty normal. I studied a lot and had a lot of good grades. so so this was that part went good, but on the other hand, I felt like my childhood was like a bit that I didn't thought much about my future, about the things that I could do different in my life. I mean, in the regular education, at least in Spain, I don't know if it's changing in other places. Is like you study a lot what you are given, and then go to the exams and spit it out, and then you are good to go if you follow that path. But no one let us think about what we want to do in the future, or try to encourage us to use are intelligent in any other ways rather than studying and getting good grades. So when I was finishing the regular studies and I had to decide what degree I should do, honestly, I had no idea of what to do. I was quite some fan of computer, but only as a user, just like doing some Windows 3.1 at that point, and also yeah, it's a bit far away. We are getting older, Fernando,
Yeah.
and and, and also playing some games and things like that. But I hadn't done much development at that point. Only a few things that we did during the school. So when I had to choose a career, I chose computer science, but I was not very sure of what I was going to find there. I had been said that doing a career is what you have to do if you are a good student. So I just followed that road. And as computer was something that I was interested in, I started studying that career and that degree. Sorry. So at that point, I started understanding what meant to become a computer scientist and a computer engineer, and it was really fun to me. I found out that I really enjoyed it, and in fact the degree was really easy to me in those terms because like everything clicked on my mind, and that was it regarding my studies. I don't know if you have
Yeah.
any questions so far or want me to
No,
continue with
I
my
mean,
story.
yeah. Let me jump in then, because it's very interesting what you're saying about these issues. I think the audience may agree or not, and that could create like a good point of discussion. When you mentioned that there are like these issues in terms of career path and orientation in university. Like sometimes it's
Mhm.
like the traditional model. Like where you're told, as you pointed out, you're told that you had to follow this path and this is the only way to go, right? I think like one of the questions I may have not only for you but also for the audience, and it would be nice to discuss and to exchange these thoughts, because for me it was like at some point I did my career too, and like I'm not gonna tell much about myself, but like just to put an example, I did my career too, and at some point I just thought is what is useful, what do I get out of this? It's like problem solving, or like usually we have to learn all the stuff ourselves, and this comes with all this content consumption and all this, right? And here is my question then: do you think it was useful, and then you had to learn much of the stuff yourself? How did you deal with that?
In my particular case, I think it was useful because I wasn't sure of what I wanted to do. But if you are really into development and you already know a lot before going into the degree, I'm not saying anyone not to do a degree because this is very personal. But I think that it shouldn't be something to adapt. For instance, when you are going to a new job, here in Spain, a lot of companies take much value into your studies, and if you have done a degree or you haven't. But I think that in our career is much more important what you have done on your own rather than what you have studied. So even if I studied a degree, I don't think it should be as important when you are trying to find a job or opting for a position. But on the other hand, I think it's interesting to do a degree in case you are not very sure of what you want to do, and in my case, it helped me a lot because otherwise I probably would have done something very different in my life, and I'm really happy with what I do. So I'm
Yeah.
grateful about it.
Right. So, and this is another question then. It's like you always knew what you wanted to do? Because I would say, it's always like this. For example, in the beginning, I was gonna study economy, and I really liked that. And 3 days before, I decided, okay, this is not my thing. And as you pointed out, I think we're pretty much everyone here is coming from this nerdy background. Like, I remember like, developing or writing my first lines of code under Windows 3.0 or something like that. And it's like, oh my God. Or playing video games, spending nights, doing LAN parties and so forth, like this with this nerdy background. And yeah, again, like, did you always knew what you wanted to do?
No, not at all. In fact, when I was in school, and I well, my first option until almost the end of the school was something like chemistry or something like that, because I enjoyed it a lot too. But now, looking at the past, if I had chosen that, I probably wouldn't have finished my career. So, but at some point, I had to decide, and for some reason, something made me decide to choose this, but I wasn't sure at all of what I was doing. I think
Right.
that when you are 18, unless you are very, I don't know, very awake about the world around you, most of us are not very sure of what we want to do with our lives. So we have to make some decisions at that point, and it's fine, because then there are some other people that decide to do a career and to a degree, and they find out that it's not their thing, and they continue with it just because it's what they studied. But in my opinion, we don't need to close to that just because we have studied something. At that age, as I mentioned, we are not very sure about anything in our lives, so it's perfectly okay to move to one place to another, and that's my thought about it.
Yeah, absolutely. I cannot agree more with you. Especially at this age, we're never sure, about what to do, and there's a lot of, moving parts in our heads, and it's
Hmm.
very very interesting, and it's a very important decision in our lives, at this point in time. But yeah, so interesting because I was asking these questions, over the chat, and Ricardo Costera said that he learned more in 1 year of work than 5 years of university, and even though that he would do it again. Um, but it has to do also with the social component and support. On the other hand, Silvia Quevedo, thanks guys for Silvia and Ricardo for the opinions here. Um, it's not. She says it's not very important what you learn, but the things how you use your strategy to go through. You know. It's interesting to see more. I think like this could raise a good discussion on Twitter. Then so thank you both. We're continuing with this. So with that being said, yeah, I'm a little bit curious about your first job, Antonio. What was your first job?
My first job was in a big company here in Spain called Indra, that everyone here knows about it because it's probably the biggest consulting company here in Spain. And it was not something that I looked for specifically, because when you end your career, there are usually like exchange jobs where you can uh, put your CV there, and then some companies interested on your profile start calling you. And I went to several companies, and in the end, I started in this one, and I started in something quite different to what I'm doing nowadays. It was we were in a team that we are very specialized in Microsoft Dynamics CRM, which was a tool that, yeah, to have all the control about the customers of a company, and also the invoices that you have with them, the relationships in general with your customers, so that you can have like a path where your customer has gone through, and then you can communicate with them in different ways to keep the communication with them.
Right.
And yeah, and and this part was, some part was just consulting in the most strict way. You were to the company and understood their needs, and then customize the tool to their specific needs. But this tool also had like a more customizable part where you could implement plugins that were implemented in .NET. So I was working with C# at that point, and with that customization, you could do a lot more things and improve the experience in the platform. So
Mm.
I was, yeah, sorry.
Go ahead.
Yeah, so I was there like for complete years. I also did in that time, I also had the opportunity to do some web development too, because apart from doing the customization of the tool, we also integrated with some webs because they had like an API too. So what I did at that point, we had the chance to create the complete web platform of some companies, and I also worked there doing some web development, also in C Sharp, and all the AESP.NET platform that they have, and which in fact, now seeing it in retrospective, it was a very powerful platform at that point. I think that Microsoft has always been like years away from the rest of development platforms with their Visual Studio, or also C Sharp. It's been a very powerful language for a long time. Lambdas existed long ago in C Sharp, and they just reached Java, I don't know, 1 or 2 years ago. So
Yeah.
yeah, it was a very interesting experience.
We're gonna get back to that topic because I think
Yeah,
might
probably.
be interesting. I agree with you because part of my past was, to work with Microsoft technologies and indeed with C Sharp. But yeah, I mean, let's continue with my next topic here. This is going to be a little bit out of technology, but again, to the audience, feel free to just ask your questions, and anything here it's completely valid. So if you're more interested in the hardcore stuff, the technical stuff, I think we have the opportunity to have here Antonio. So yeah, please go ahead and put your questions on the chat. I'm gonna be reading them. So Antonio, yeah, apart from like being, a badass in technology, what are
Look
your
at
hobbies?
that. My
What are your,
hobbies.
yes.
Okay, that's a difficult question, because I've always been so busy that it's difficult to me to make a difference between my hobbies and my job. But I would say that since I was young, I've been interested in creating things, in particular in creating something personal, something that was mine. For instance, to put a very silly example, but when I was a teenager, I I did like I created like a mini job inside eBay where I was a lot into anime at that point, and manga and all that. So what I did was to buy lots of merchandising and figures in Japan. I imported them to Spain, and then sold them one to one through eBay. So the difference was like my my profit to then go out and enjoy that part of my adolescence. So it was now again in retrospective, it's interesting because I did it just because I was trying to discover and find out new things and new ways to make money probably, but now I see that this has accompanied me during all my life, because after that, as we'll talk later probably, uh, I've been always trying to push, apart from my work as a developer for third party companies, for other companies, I've also been always doing little things that led me to where I am right now.
Cool.
So this has always been one part of my interests, and what everything that it entails, like for instance, uh, digital marketing, or how to create websites, or things regarding WordPress, or even accounting, how to organize your company and your team. So a lot of little things that made me all the time being busy with learning new stuff that were like a little bit different from what we use as developers.
Right, right.
So
I mean, that's interesting because I got a question here. You know, when you were talking about, you know, your figures, you know, and all this stuff that you did, you know, in Japan or with Japan, Ricardo asked like, what kind of style was that? Anime, manga, something like that? These figures. Are you a big fan of them, by the way? Yeah.
uh, at that point, when I was in my adolescence, I was a big fan of lots of animes. I watch a lot. I prefer like short animes of 24 or 48 episodes rather than those big ones like Naruto or Bleach, which I also watched, but ended up leaving them because I probably know that I don't have that compromise with the with the shows. But yeah, where I was younger, I watched a lot of smaller series or TV or anime shows. But nowadays I have it a little forgotten, to be honest. I watch something from time to time, but nothing like it was before, that I even had a list of what I have watched, and try to discover the new shows in that season that were the ones that were going to crush it and things like that. But yeah.
It is terrible, man. It's like, you know, when it creates this addiction, right? Like, I mean, when you start comics and you know, watching nerdy stuff and so forth, and that brings up, you know, I don't know, this came, you know, just came to my mind now, and you know, because of what you mentioned, you know, this compromise that you create, and for me, it's like sometimes I create these kind of compromises because I procrastinate, you know. Procrastination, by the way, it's such a big topic, you know. I don't know how you know, deal with it, because for me it's like, okay, sometimes I find, you know, time to do other things that are not, you know, high priority, just to avoid, you know, doing something more important, and it's such a topic. So I would definitely appreciate here, you know,
Of
some
course, yeah.
stuff from the viewers regarding procrastination. So Antonio,
I-
with that being said, and I seen you like, you know, doing a lot of stuff, and it looks like, and you know, you contribute a lot to communities. You're very active, and so forth. Do you procrastinate?
Well, of course, we all do. I think that's that's difficult not to do, but there's a perfect trick to avoid procrastination, and I'm going to unveil it today, which is just commit uh, to something, to someone to do it, and then you will be forced to do it. For instance, when I decided to write my book, I released it at 10% of the end of the book. So as people bought the book in that state of the progression, I was forced to finish it because there were people that had bought that book. So they wanted their book finished. That's an example. Or for instance, now that I'm releasing a new program, I just forced myself by creating a beta group of the program where I have to publish every week. I have to publish a new module of the program. So if I don't do it, there's people that have paid for that. So I'm forced to do this. But obviously, there's no need to be money in the middle. You can commit to your followers by saying next week I'm going to publish an article, or as I've done now, every week I'm going to publish a new video on YouTube. If you do that, there's people waiting for you to for your content. So you are forced to do it, even if at that point you don't feel like doing it. And that's how I try to prevent procrastination, and
Right.
also with very good planning. If I well, let's leave this for later when we talk about my current state, but I try to plan everything I'm going to do and set dates, and that helps avoid
Yeah.
procrastination.
Yeah, we're gonna get back to it. Especially what you mentioned. There's also a couple of question. Javi Arroyo has a question related to Kotlin, but we're gonna get back. So Javi, stay tuned, stay online, because we're gonna answer that question. I wanted to keep let's say a program, even though trust me, this was not prepared at all. Like we only had a 2 minutes chat with Antonio. We said, okay, what are we gonna do? And we said, let's improvise a little bit.
Yes.
So here we are. No, so Antonio, just to continue before diving a little bit deeper into more technical stuff. Still, you know, um, this is part of your life and your careers as well. So as far as I know, you mentioned that you started in a big company. I know that you were working, in different companies and in startup lately, and then now you decided to go for the freelancing for your own company, let's say, and maybe you can shade some light on this and spread a little bit more what you're doing, why the change, and what were the pros and cons and why you decided that.
Okay, first I'll start with how I started with Android, because I think it's a good
Yep.
base on how it all developed later. So I was at that company, and then I have like an existential crisis, to say it in a way, where I started thinking that I was not doing what I really liked, because yeah, I kind of enjoyed my work, but in the end it didn't fulfill me completely, because I was doing things that nobody could see later. Only one or two people in huge companies were using the things that we were doing. So it was like we were putting a lot of effort in something that then so many people were using. So I didn't feel myself like I was changing anyone else's life. So that, together with my personal awakening on what I said at the beginning, that we are like everyone moved to the same through the same path, that we have to do our studies, then a degree, then find a good job so that you can buy a good house and have a lot of children. So it's like the path that the society has given for you, and I felt like I was missing something in all these things. So at that point, I started like reading a lot about self. I don't know how this is said in English. Self growth
Yeah.
books and things like that, where I think that a point in your life can be very helpful, and they helped me understand that I was not at the point of my life where I wanted to be, and that like started changing a lot of things in my head first, and that's reflective, of course, in my life later. For instance, I I started uh, looking for new things to do, because I was not convinced that what I was doing was the thing that I should do, and I was even sure that programming was my thing. So I started like thinking about other ways to create my own company, and how it could be about. And and at some point, I started learning about the mobile development because at that point it was a thing already, but not so developed as it is right now. And I decided to start taking a look at it because maybe I could create an app that then I could live from, for instance, with ads or with creating a service or something like that. So I had to decide whether to start with iOS or Android. And the decision point was simply the money because to start working, developing with iOS, I had to buy a new MacBook device or something like that, and also an iPhone, and it was a lot of money. While the first phone I bought, that the first Android phone in the end was like 80 euros or something like that, and my Windows device could be used to develop Android apps. So that was the only decision why I started with Android instead of iOS at that point. And since the very beginning, I loved it, and I enjoyed a lot. That's something that was in my mind. I could reflect it in a screen in that phone, and also it was so easy to upload an app and start sharing with the rest of the world that I got a lot into this, and I was so excited with it that is the first time that I decided to create a blog about development, because I have some other things before, but specifically about development was my first one, and and that's how it all started, related to Android development. Yeah,
Mm.
so yeah, from that point, I
Wait, quick
managed to
question. I have a
open.
question. Sorry.
Sure.
I have a question. Then, like maybe just to get a little bit more context to the listeners. I had to say like my first Android device was a G1, so the first official one, and I started with a prototype. Do you remember which was your first Android version, your first device, or what you did when you
My first,
started Android
yeah,
development?
I remember that it was a Huawei, for Huawei these days, but it was a Huawei, a very cheap one. I don't remember the model exactly, and it has 2.3 on it. So I didn't start it at the very beginning of Android. I started with something that it was not so difficult to develop when compared to previous versions. But yeah, that was my first one.
I remember those times, man. As I hope the viewers had have started a little bit later because I remember like the first versions fragmentation and never would work. And I remember like by the way, the worst Android API was the camera. With some camera stuff in all devices was like there were these actually these Chinese devices without any support at all, and like people complaining, hey, my app doesn't work with my I don't know which brand device, but like yeah, anyway, that's a conversation for another time, because I think there's a lot we can talk about.
Yeah,
Yeah,
indeed.
yeah. So
So
just like if you want to continue, yeah, that like I
yeah, of
would.
course. So at that point, thanks in part to my first blog, which was in Spanish, and it had quite some traction in the Android world. I managed to move in the same company from the from the team where I was before to a mobile team, and then I that was my first incursion into Android development as a profession, not as a hobby.
Yeah.
But there I was not long for a long time, like 3 months, because I was most of the time without um, I couldn't work in any apps because it was in a transition moment where we didn't have any projects, and that some of them were starting, what we weren't in the development process yet. So I burned out pretty quick there, and I decided to look for another thing. And then that was when I started working at another consulting company. This was only mobile development, but I enjoyed a lot being there because I had my first opportunity to develop Android apps that a lot of people indeed were using. For instance, probably many people abroad won't know about it, but I was the the lead at the beginning of the Vips app, the one that here in Spain has restaurants like Foster's Hollywood or like Starbucks and things like that, and that a lot of people is using today and regretting it because because the it was not because of our part, but because the API of that company is not the best. I'm not going to say things that are going to keep recorded, but
Wait. I mean, don't blame the company and all that. It was your legacy code what failed.
we,
The coding problem.
we didn't have legacy because it was
Yeah,
in fact
right.
the first time that I applied clean architecture to to an app.
That's good to know. By the way, so before I forget, Ricardo from from the chat, he
Mhm.
said like his first Android device was this Huawei Hi-Teos
Yes.
X3. Maybe it was yours too.
Not sure, to be honest. I had to look for it because I cannot be with this doubt anymore. But I look for it after the interview
No
and
problem.
find out which one it was. It
No
could be. I
problem.
don't remember, to be honest.
Okay, go ahead. And sorry for the interruption. And I needed
No, no
to
problem.
jump in
The
and
chat is for
please.
this, so interrupt me all you need. And yeah, I enjoyed it a lot because I did a lot of participated in a lot of important projects here in Spain, and gave me the opportunity to lead a team and be in charge of other people. So it was a very interesting opportunity and a very good process. But when I was about to do a year in this company, I had my biggest opportunity to move to another company and work remotely, so I couldn't say no. And I started working at Plex, where I've been working like 4 years. Yeah, about 4 years it was. And that was my first incursion to a big product where you are I moved from the consulting world to the product world, which is another topic that we could talk about for a long time, but they both options have their pros and cons, and I enjoyed a lot working in a product that you can feel that it's yours and where all your decisions are easily visible by the users, and the things that you are doing are like uh, being affecting and being used by a lot of people, and I really enjoyed working in a product like that. And here's like the end of my progression as an employee. And yeah, we can leave it here if you want and continue later with the rest.
Yeah, and then like regarding that, because I was reading,
Okay.
some a question here also from Ricardo. I like Ricardo. You're very active and like that. I like when people are
Yeah,
curious and not
and that's
only
a very good question.
yeah,
Yeah.
not only asking questions but also contributing and sharing knowledge. That's very important. Um, yeah, so here's another question that I will leave it to you. This is specific for you, Antonio. And it says, Ricardo says, and nowadays everyone is writing articles and on blog, which is great. But back then, was it a common thing? I mean, did your coworkers treat you differently for being an author or something like that? Because just to build on this, and from my side, that was as well.
Yeah.
Content consumption nowadays it's a thing. everyone is writing articles. The information generation, it's insane. It's insane. You cannot be up to date, and you see, some people actually getting crazy. I've been giving some advice on this. You don't. There's so much information, so many opinions nowadays with all these means of communication, and just you can answer this question yourself, Antonio. It was about like if you were, being treated differently because of being an author back in those days where,
Yeah,
content consumption was not very as popular as it is nowadays.
totally. And first, because of what Ricardo mentioned, that at that point there were not so many blogs, and in particular in Spanish there were hardly any. I think maybe one or two more apart from mine. So this second job that I got, the one that I was 1 year working in a mobile consulting, I got this job. I'm sure that 80% of it was because they were using my articles to answer their questions when they were developing their apps. So having me there like was going directly to the source. And in fact, at that point, and even now, I didn't know that much. I only knew about what I was writing. So the difference in knowledge wasn't that big, but I think it put me, in our case at least, in a different situation where I was considered like I had much more knowledge that the rest of the team, which in the end was not true. And I feel, and I'm sure that you can relate with that. And when you are exposed like this, writing articles or doing conferences and all that, people think that you know much more than what you know in reality, and that you have the answer to all the questions. And that's how I felt at that point, and even more at that point because I wasn't used to it yet, about people thinking that I knew everything. Now I'm I can very easily say I don't know about something, but at that point I felt like I was imposting a little my situation because of this thing. I don't know if you have felt like the same way. I'm sure you do because we talked about this before. You can
Yeah,
share
sure. No,
your
no,
opinion about this.
yeah, you're totally right. Like, I mean, I think like we're not any different. I mean, sometimes like it's a luxury. Some people just come over and tell you what they're grateful because of what we have been doing. I think it's not anything. We like to share. That's it, and we are a little bit extroverted in that sense. But like we don't know it all. I always say like I mean the hardest part of being a professional is to know how and when to say no. We shouldn't be intimidated by anyone, and also I always say like we put our own pressure on ourselves, right? I mean in the end no one is pointing us with a gun, and that's why just to give you an example, sometimes the CEO of the company just comes over to your desk and asks you to do something pretty fast for tomorrow, and that you cannot do it. And even though that you might say, yeah, but that's what you pointed out. I learned when to say no, and if they fire you, they are not going to solve the problem anyway. So
Yeah.
but yeah. Anyway, I got another question then. If you want to then build up on all this, Antonio, yeah, just feel free to jump in. This is meant to be a chat between friends and between, all the people here. Where I think we're all in the same boat and we're struggling with the same problems and so forth. So I have another question here from Yaroslav. Is Shuk? I hope hopefully I pronounce Yaroslav. I pronounce your surname properly. No, just send me an audio message with it. Yaroslav asks, says, guys, please tell me, is it real to find a job as an Android developer without any degree in CS? He wants to switch from a lawyer to his hobby. just programming. Man, it's like you're a lawyer. That's awesome. Uh, wow, such a a
A big
contrast.
change.
Yeah, it's very interesting, and definitely want to know more about that. How you dive into it. So, what would you say, Antonio? Here, is it possible to change, career path, and what's your experience on this? I mean, you pointed out so you gave us
I
some clue.
I think it's possible, but I think it requires effort. Of course, it's not like you are going to send CVs without anything to show, and they are getting you. In the end, you need to have a way to show the people that is interviewing you that you know what you are talking about, and that you know how to solve the problems the company has. So my my recommendation is that you have these things to show. For instance, an app that you can showcase when you go to the interviews, or a GitHub with collaborations in other repositories, or creating your own repositories, or writing articles, as we mentioned before. Nowadays, it's more and more difficult because there are a lot of people writing articles and doing all these kind of things. But if you can show that you know what they are requiring, I think that you don't need a specific um, career, or sorry, a specific degree for that. I think that it's that it's easier. It depends a lot on the company, how the company feels about this, because there are companies that require degrees and you cannot change that, but there are others that are more not worried, but more aware of the knowledge of the people, and don't care much about their studies, but what they have proved to do later after those studies.
Right.
So yeah,
Yeah.
that's my
Yeah.
opinion.
I would say, like, just to add some more information. In my case, Yaroslav and the rest of the viewers, I don't have a title, to be honest. I mean, I did my studies, as I said. I'm originally from Argentina, but like I've never convalidated. So for me, it's like I live in Europe, and for me, it's about like when I'm interviewing people, and I don't mind really about papers. I think it's very well known that I think Antonio agrees on that we care more about the people itself. I think we can all always learn. The most important parts, or I will always prioritize being a good person over knowledge. There's some basics, of course, but I think here it's what it counts. So I think it's perfectly possible. Probably you might not start with a senior position, but you can always start like as a junior, and or bring up, or maybe in your case, if you're a lawyer and we're talking about one of the viewers, you can work on some kind of related project on the IT part and bring up your knowledge on that field to the project, and be do some pair programming with someone, and start diving deeper into that. I think that's also my opinion. I think we're very well aligned with Antonio. This is a topic we constantly talk about. But yeah, so I don't want to take any more text or speaking here, because Antonio, we want to know more about you, and you're the one
No problem.
answering question, and then I can cover myself, like, okay, Antonio,
You
you
answer.
answer the question. Yeah. So I would say, Antonio, like, with that being said, so you were talking about your career path, and now you ended up working at Plex, and I remember like having a couple of discussions with you about product, about coding, architectures, and so forth, which was very amazing. But then now you have your own project, as we can see. All the people who are following you, me included, we know what you're doing for the community, and again, it's very valuable. But like, how do you feel about it? What were the pros and cons of having your own project? From jumping from a product, from a company where you were an employee, to just, work for you, for yourself. I know it's not an easy path, but like, yeah, if you can tell us a little bit more.
Okay, so the pros of being in a company, I think they are pretty clear. Well, some of them at least, that you have some stability and you know what your income is going to be at the end of the month. And you also can work, if you manage to get into an interesting project, you are going to work with a team and in a project that probably would be pretty difficult to build up on your own. It's possible, of course, but it's really difficult. For instance, I don't know, me working at Plex, or you working at SoundCloud, probably we cannot imagine to create this kind of products ourselves.
Mhm.
So I think that's what gives you working in a team, that and specifically working for another company. And and the cons of that, probably that you are tied to, in the end, to what the company wants from you. If the in the end the product is, or the products that you are developing have not been decided by you, and even you can have more or less um, this decision in what you are doing, but in general, the decisions are not made by you. So you are developing something that someone else has given. For instance, the designers or the product team, or things like that, like that. So if you are wanting to create your own things, it's possible that this is not the best place. Another thing is that you don't have in general, we are having more and more um, flexibility in these new projects, in these new companies, because with remote works and also with these flexible schedules, it's easier and easier to balance your life and your work. But in the end, you are tied probably to work 8 hours per day and weekends free and all that. So the regular schedule that doesn't allow you to be more flexible, as it's my case now. And when we reach to the part where why I decided to do this, probably you will understand it better. But I think that these are the cons. And and obviously the cons of creating your own project is that you need to have a base if you don't want to just throw out and then uh, probably miss everything, because you need a financial cushion in case everything goes wrong. You need to have something that is tangible, that you are sure that it can develop well and work. And I think that if you don't want to do it good, you have to start a lot sooner than when you decide that you want to jump into it. At least if you want to have something stable from day zero.
Right.
And that explains probably a little of my progression while I was working for other companies. And you can see other things that appear in the meanwhile, like the book, the course, and all these things. They were part, of course, because I enjoyed it, but also part because if at some point I decided to start working for myself, I needed something that could pay the bills. So
Yeah. I think that's one of the, the most challenging parts, right? I mean, to be able to be profitable without sacrificing, what you used to have, or at least in the beginning. I know how much you struggled and how, strong you had to be in order to make such a decision. So yeah, I mean, regarding that, now that you have your own project, I think, Kotlin, it's a thing. Your reference, you wrote a book. I think Kotlin was a game changer for you, apart from what you had done in the
yeah,
past.
totally.
And before I forget, like, and Javi had a question related to Kotlin. You know, Kotlin is officially supported by Google from, you know, a year or more ago. So let's get into the technical stuff. I have a couple of
Okay.
questions here too. So Javi is asking, um, is if do you think that Kotlin can be multi-platform? If it's a thing, what's your opinion on this? And if you also think it's the future of mobile development.
Okay. As we also say when we talk about these topics, you and me, that we have talked about this a lot. This is like trying to predict the future, which is impossible to everyone, I think. But what I think about coding multi-platform is that it can be an option in the future, and of course, I really hope it is. But we have nothing sure right now because multi-platform is still a preview version, and they probably have a lot of things to tweak before it's ready to be used in production. So my feeling is that, as with everything, there will be use cases. Some companies, probably in smaller companies, where they want to have a good base of code that is shared among the different platforms. I think it can be helpful, and probably in other situations, there will still make sense to have different technologies for different platforms and keep doing things as we are doing it right now. It's the same as when we are asked about Flutter or things like that. Like that, my opinion with all this is that there are use cases where when it makes sense and it may work. And if I had to decide something today, I'm the CEO or CTO of a company, and I have to decide to start using Kotlin multi-platform. I probably wait a little more until things are more clear about the future of this project.
Right.
I'm sure that it will become a thing because the Kotlin team is putting a lot of effort, but it's difficult to predict whether it will be something as mediatic as Kotlin for Android development or something like that. Probably we need to find out in the future.
Yeah, I think that also answers the question from also Ricardo, which were about thoughts on Flutter. I mean, it's from my side. If you let me, you know, add my opinion here, I would say I definitely agree with you. I think, you know, you had to apply, you know, software development, you know, in order to where you can fix a problem. Like, let's put an example. Like, I'm not a strong believer to this multi-platform, you know, frameworks or programming languages. Not yet. I think they can be the future, of course, because it's unpredictable and it's pretty hard to say, you know, how far they're gonna get. But like in my experience, I think, you know, you can always use a combination of native development and you know, and all these frameworks like, let's say, React Native or Flutter or whatever. So at SoundCloud, I always give the same example. Like, for example, when you wanna, if you wanna build up something very complex, I think there's no room for React Native, or at least I haven't seen, you know, super mega complex applications out there. But like, you can use a hybrid, like, for example, implement, you know, the login screen, which is not usually, it's pretty straightforward, I would say, and usually it's a cross-platform thing. It doesn't change even the UI, so you might be able to develop that in React Native or Flutter, and then combine that with you know, native development. I don't know. That's my 2 cents here, and I wanted to just spit it out. Sorry, Antonio.
No problem at all. And let's put a very specific example. Imagine how difficult it is that the camera works for all Android phones. Imagine that apart from that, you have another layer that is Flutter, for instance, that needs to work for both all Android cameras, but also for the iPhone camera. and let's say in the future that they are doing web for the camera on a laptop or a personal computer. It's it's completely it's very difficult that everything works smoothly in all platforms just with one solution. So I really hope that this is the future, because it will be very helpful for companies to grow faster. But at least at this point, I see it very difficult. As you mentioned, we need something in the middle. Something in the middle can work for some companies. For instance, having a big part of it in Flutter and some parts in native in Android native and iOS native.
Right. Right.
So yeah, that's my
Yeah,
view on it.
definitely. I think like pretty much everyone on the chat, agrees on that. But like, let me, Harun Van Gereka, hopefully I pronounced again correctly your name. Uh, he was saying like, now that you're doing, we have been talking about Kotlin and, your background and how you ended up where you are now. And, you're currently, mentoring people, right? I mean, including me, it's super nice always to exchange knowledge with you. Um, and he's asking, you're doing this, but like, do you have a mentor? How do you come up with all your knowledge, or do you have a reference, or how do you deal with that? I guess that's a very interesting question.
Yeah, in fact, there's a person that I owe him a lot, and that you've also worked with him, so you know about him, which is Manuel Peinado. For the people that has been working a lot of time in Android, they may remember him because he did a couple of very useful libraries at that moment. And I was with Kini at Indra for 1 month, just 1 month. We were together there, and then he moved to 20, where he started working with you, in fact. And we keep a lot in contact and talking about a lot of things. For instance, MVP, that at that point wasn't really a thing in Android. I think you were the first ones. There are 20 trying to put it into Android, and a lot about clean architecture. So thanks to those conversations, many of the things that I know regarding good practices in coding, it's like I started learning about them, and yeah, also then with you, with Jorge Barroso, and all the ones that have been always pushing good practices on Android development, and that I also learned a lot from you, both from your articles and also when talking to you in events or in different situations like this. So yeah, probably not a very specific mentor, but there have been key people in my progress that have helped me a lot. Yeah.
Man, those are, such awesome words. Thanks for that. Really, it's mutual. Like, to the audience, we have been friends, and we share knowledge, and we are open always, to help each other and to help, the rest of yeah, the community as well. And we kind of share the same philosophy here. And Joao Tavares, got another question. So it's related to the mentor stuff. So yeah, it's I think it's a nice topic, and he's asking, what do you guys feel are the main bullet points to teach someone? Like, what is something that you always teach someone new? What would you say in this area,
Yeah,
Antonio?
it's not easy because these days I'm not as I'm teaching coding to Android developers. They usually have quite some baggage and quite some knowledge about it. But what I like to say usually is that we don't focus so much on the specific platform we are working on to learn all the libraries that appear, all the smaller parts of the framework, because that in the end is going to rise when you need it. But what is really important, in my opinion, is to learn how to code, learn good practices, and how this then can be used in other situations. Because, for instance, now that we have Flutter, a lot of people is very worried that they will stop uh, working as Android developer and have to learn a new framework like Flutter. Frameworks are learned in a couple of weeks, or if they are very difficult, in a month or something like that. But what remains is the good coding practices, and what we have been talking about for a long time, things like architectural patterns and presentation patterns and good practices, and also how to work well on a team, and these kind of things that are transversal to every platform and every technology, and that we as developers are going to be changing a lot, and this is the only thing that is kind of immutable in our progress.
Yeah. Yeah, totally, totally agree. I would also, soft skills, like, I think like I would
Me
prioritize,
too. Yeah.
yeah, good software, a good software engineer over a ninja platform. Of course, you need, someone who knows a lot about the platform itself, as you pointed out. But I think we are both strong believers of good practices of, problem solving in general that could apply to any solution out there. I think one of the things that, and I agree that you pointed out, is like, architectural patterns, good practices again. I think that's very important, and also, being a good professional, being a good person. I think that will give you a lot of, good things. You can always
Indeed.
sleep well, and I gotta say that because of Antonio. He's, for me, it's like he has all my respect because of being such, a big-hearted person. So, Antonio, this goes for you, and
Thank
yeah,
you.
of course, I'm super happy to have you in my circles, and and in this opportunity again to know more about you. So, with that being said, because otherwise I'm gonna cry, that you're gonna make me cry with, such lovely words. So, Javier Pinero, yeah, Javi, I know you, is asking, whether you practice meditation or something else to have good mental health.
That's a good question. I've tried for 3 months in a row or so, and as I didn't find any benefits, I couldn't continue with it, because I'm very. The moment I wake up, I have my mind already thinking about a lot of things, and I try to focus on meditation to try to calm down my noise in my head, but it didn't work out for me. So in the end, I wasn't consistent enough, and maybe you need to be like 1 year doing it so that you can feel the results. But for me, it wasn't helpful. What helps me a lot is what I mentioned at the beginning. That is to have very clear what I'm going to do during the day. So when I wake up, I I already have the things that I'm working on during the rest of the day, and then that gives me clarity and gives me um, removes the possible stress that I may have about all the things that I have to do. I can focus on what I have to do, and that helps me a lot. I'm a big fan of planning, and I always plan at the end of the week what I'm going to do the next week. And I also have like a 3 month away plan, big plan that then I split into parts during the quarter. So these are the things that keep me balanced. I think this, and of course, have time for myself and for my family, and be able to forget about the rest of the things for some parts of the day.
Right, right. I think, yeah, I mean, you seem to be a very, I know actually that you're a very structured person. I think that helps too, to put on these deadlines and milestones in a, let's say, mid long term. I planned, but like in my case, I meditate like only 5 minutes a day. I think that's that helps me. I think it's very personal, as you said, Antonio, in the beginning. I didn't think it was good, but then it got better because putting your mind in blank it's not easy. And same as you, like sometimes you're just going to bed thinking about what you had to do, and that has an impact on how much you rest up and so forth. So I think you had to find your way, as you pointed out. Those are good tips, to be more structured and what you had to do and so forth. um yeah, that's cool. Then one of the things I wanted to I'm probably gonna jump out of um yeah of the technical stuff, let's see, because you're a dad now. So, so I think that's one of the biggest, or the hardest jobs you have ever had. I know. I remember like talking to you and say and asking you how much you're sleeping. Yeah. How impactful was it in your life? I know it's for the good, right? But like, how did you deal with it? And how do you feel about it?
Well, having a baby, which was almost a year ago, put my life upside down in many things, and for the good all, I must say. The first one was the change of priorities, of course, and at that point, I had like another life that depended on me. So I had to take a lot of to make a lot of decisions. And the first one was that I couldn't continue doing both things at the same time, both being a developer for a company and also running my own business. So at that point, I had to decide whether to forget everything and start and continue working for a company, or try it and see what happens. So at that point, I decided, like a couple of months after my child was born, that I had to take this decision, and I decided to continue with my project, which also is a bit into what we mentioned before, that about the flexibility, because of course I had a lot of flexibility before, because I was working at a remote company that also gives you a, in our case, it gave a lot of easiness in of all these things, so I could more or less balance my life very well. But in the end, you have to do a good job for a person that is paying you, so you have an extra responsibility on that part. And I wanted that if I had a part of my week, or even some moments during the year, that I was not so productive, because I prefer to be more with my baby and with my wife, that I could do it without any issues, and the only responsible person was me, and it was only affecting me. So that was what in the end made me take this decision, and also because of all the effort that I had put to make this thing work out, and also I didn't want to leave all this effort away without trying before. So this was the moment where I decided that I wanted to try it on my own, and to begin with this. And answering the question that you mentioned about how I'm sleeping and how I'm doing to balance everything, the thing is, again, some planning, and taking into account that these things can happen. I have, for instance, some blocks during the week where I don't plan anything, for in case everything happens. For instance, this night I haven't sleep barely anything, so I had to wake up a little later so that I could be kind of fresh now. and I had to start later in the morning, and this means that the things that I had planned for the previous for the time I went sleeping, I had to do it at another time. So that flexibility is very easy when you are your own boss and you can decide when you do one thing or another. And yeah, this is where I'm now, more or less. I try to adapt my all my life to the needs of my baby instead of doing it the other way around. So if I don't have to work one day because she has to go to the doctor or because we want to go to some place, I can move my schedule in any way so that this can happen, or even work from another place, because this, as being remote, is you have this chance to do it. So yeah, this, I think it's easy when you have the control of your time.
Yeah. Yeah, I think, I mean, I would definitely say like those are very lovely words, and I think this teaches us something, like in the end, priorities in life. It's not about jobs in the end. I'm pretty sure we are all in this bubble, fortunately, and the and we get a lot of stress out of our job and so forth. And you have given us a clear example of what's important, which is people around us, people we love, and so forth. That's something that I always encourage people to think about. You shouldn't get stressed about uh, work. I mean, sometimes it's inevitable, but like as you can see here, Antonio, and I know you, and I know what you're doing with your daughter and all that, and it's such an example. It's such an example that what's important, and what is not. So yeah,
Yeah.
and I know how hard it is for you as well.
Yeah, I
um
think one thing I wanted to mention is that for me it has been very important to be very sure about what my values are, what's important to me, and what's more important that the other things. And this, of course, change a lot during your life. When you are younger, it's possible that your career is the most important thing, and it's perfectly okay to put it up front, as I did at some point. and maybe later your values and the things that are more important to you, as you mentioned, change. But it's really important, in my opinion, to do that work, to at least sit down and think about these things, about what your values are, what's the footprint that you want to leave in the world, and how you can achieve that, instead of letting you go and go from one place to another based on what people are expecting from you, on the situations in your life. I think it's important to always have your values upfront and make your decisions based on that.
yeah, yeah. So yeah, that's super cool, man. Yeah, really, really appreciate that, and that piece of phrases. Yeah, so I would say, like, we're gonna be jumping back and forth between technical stuff as well,
No
because
problem.
the viewers are very interested into it as well. So I mean, Fared Hermosa, uh, asked a question. I'm going to try to translate it and summarize it. It was in Spanish. So he's asking about, like, what should we learn to be a good software engineer, especially Android. And he's mentioning, he has been using MVP, but he couldn't fully understand why we had all these abstractions layers and so forth. And then some concepts he couldn't understand, so he decided to learn the basic stuff. So he's kind of, giving a bunch of bullet points, which he thinks it's useful to become a good software engineer. I'm going to read them Antonio. So maybe you can build on this. So he's mentioning
Mhm.
algorithms, then object-oriented programming, analysis and design, and software patterns and architecture. Do you think like these are the basic building blocks in order to become a good software engineer? How would you deal with that? Or what are your ideas on this?
Well, I think that of course, if you are focusing into or oriented object programming, you need to know the basic and know them very well because it's a bit tricky at the beginning. And once you got to that, in my opinion, algorithms are not as important as some other people usually mention because, for instance, they are asked in a lot of interviews, and in my opinion, this is something that it's good to have, but I don't personally feel that it's so important so that it can prevent you from accessing to a job position or not. It depends, of course, a lot on the situations because if you are going to work for the Google search engine for to say a thing, it's obvious that you need to know about algorithms. But in general situation, for instance, as an Android developer, I don't think that it's so important. But of course, it's something good to know at some point, or at least that you have the basic idea, so that you can go Google at some point and if you need it and answer the rest of the questions that you may have. But on the other hand, then what I usually try to teach is first the first thing that I think is important is to work in a team, and that means for this there are things that you cannot teach. It's something that is like or that they are very difficult to teach. How to work with other people, how to understand each other, how to not to judge people just because they think differently, different of you, these kind of things are very difficult to teach. But apart from that, regarding team working, I think it's interesting to teach about uh, technologies like Git or GitHub or Git or GitHub. I never remember how it is said in English. Git, I think, and also how to create pull requests, review code, per programming, these kind of things. I think that are even more important than the rest because that's when you are going to get more knowledge from other people than doing any other thing. Just when you work in a team.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm sure you agree with this because it's what you usually advocate. So, but
Yeah.
apart from that, then I tend to teach some things regarding clean code and solid, and then I go to presentation patterns like MVP and VBM. Then I get into architecture and dependency injection. That is one of the trickiest things to understand, I think. And then testing, I think this could be the progress from when you can go from the beginning to the end regarding uh, software design, I would say.
Yeah. Yeah, I think those are really, really good tips. So I totally agree with that. I cannot add more because I think, yeah, it perfectly fits with what I think about. So then I will be, asking. This is a kind of a tricky question I wanted to ask, and I haven't told you about it. So I think would like to at least to wrap it up, or unless there are more questions, I think people might be interested, and you're very reachable in the social networks and so forth. But I would say, let's go, nerdy here. Like if I would give you a DeLorean, and Dr. Brown, and you could go back to the past, and would you change anything in your career? Would you change anything in your life? Do you think like you made, a big mistake that you might be able to fix, with the DeLorean, let's say?
Well, I never want to regret for everything that I've done, because I think everyone learns from everything. But in order to speed up my progress, I would probably have gone sooner to events and to do networking and meet people before that I did, because I think that really was one of my inflection points in my career, when I started meeting other people that were doing the same as me, where we could push each other to improve, and I think that was something important to me. And I would have said to myself in the past that I could have started doing that before, not even with Android, but only with Android, but even before, when I was doing other things that were not related to Android. I think that it would have helped me to be more passionate about what I was doing, and to enjoy more my career at that point.
Right. Yeah. That's good.
Um,
Yeah. Sorry, go ahead.
yeah, and I don't say not sure if anything else. I haven't done the perfect path, but I'm quite happy with what I've done, and as I said, you can learn from everything. So I think there are no mistakes, but it's another thing you tried and didn't work out. So there's one thing less to try. You can
Yeah.
continue with the next one that will hopefully be the successful one.
You mentioned a key word, which is mistakes. You know, I think like those are the ones that where we learn from, and we know that. Yeah. So very, very interesting. And just again to summarize it, I would, like to ask you, of course, I will give you freedom to expand yourself because this is your podcast. And and, and if I
Today is
don't,
yours.
definitely, yeah. So, okay, there's another question before I, ask my last question. So Joe wants to know, is it a random question? I think that we like random questions here.
Yeah.
And and he's asking, what's your favorite music band to listen when you're programming? If you're doing that, do you listen to music when you're programming?
In fact, that's something that we miss when talking about hobbies, because we just mentioned one and continue with other things. I I really love music, and I probably listened to a lot more music a few years ago, and but probably most people won't know many of the groups I listen to, because they are mostly independent groups here in Spain, or even some other independent groups around the world. So I tend to use things that are not very mainstream. And and yeah, for instance, if I had to choose my favorite composer nowadays, it would be uh, a person that calls himself Sleeping at Last, which is a group that is very instrumental, and he even doesn't do any concerts or thing like that, any shows. He's only like probably I am now, building my own thing from home, and compaginating it very well with life work balance. So yeah, this is, oh, he Fernando disappeared. So I can continue with this. So yeah, I enjoy music a lot, and I'm but I usually don't listen to the mainstream things, because I don't know. I prefer to find out things, and I'm very happy when I discover a very unknown group that do things that I enjoy. For instance, when I was younger, I enjoyed a lot going to bars with, I don't know, maybe 20 or 30 people, listening to an artist only with his or her guitar, and that's what made me feel the music much more than going to huge events, where in the end you are watching the person through a screen because you are so far that you cannot even see the faces of the artist. So yeah, I
Yeah,
think that summarizes it.
I can picture you with a lot of piercings, long hair and like heavy metal. So,
No,
by the way, I'm a big fan of heavy metal, but yeah, so that's interesting because this is the other side of Antonio. We also wanted to know. So just like to finish up the interview, I think we got a lot of valuable stuff here, and you probably will summarize it with a post or whatever. But like one of the things that we are expecting, me included, as a viewer. If you had to recommend us one thing or a tip, what would that be? It can be anything, something related to, the technical stuff, to your job or whatever. You have like here the microphone to the world and you want to say something nice or valuable for all of us. What would that be?
yeah, there are so many things that's a difficult one, and I know it because I ask it when someone
Yeah.
is interviewed. But I would say from everything that the most important thing is that you really enjoy what you are doing and that you don't let yourself um, be absorbed by the new trends or by everything that it's been released every day. That we in our industry feel very often like very crowded of information, and we feel like we cannot keep up with all the things that are new in our industry. And my suggestion is that you think that it's not required to know everything, and it's better to know a few things well and enjoy them, and that you feel that they are giving you something in your progress, rather than having to learn everything and being obsessed and stressed because you cannot uh, keep up the progress of the industry. We are not going to be able to keep up the progress by any means. So it's better to accept it and to focus on what you need in your day to day. And as I mentioned, really know what you want for your life and not what others are deciding that you should do. In our case, I feel guilty sometimes because we as there's some more visible, to say it in a way, parts of the industry, we like generate the need of people being up to date all the day, and be all the day reading articles and trying new stuff. And I try to diminish that, to make it less visible by saying these things, that we don't need to know about everything. And if you find useful one of my articles because that day you need it for your work, it's perfectly okay. But you don't have to read anything and watch all videos, because it's not necessary, and it's very problematic for your health, I think, even.
Whoa, yeah, that was very deep, I have to say, Antonio.
Well, not so
But
much.
in a good way. I cannot agree more. I think it's very valuable what you're giving us, and you're realistic, and you're aware of what the problems are out there because of experience. You have a lot of experience and so forth. I would ask the viewers, if you have any more questions, just speed them out. We're gonna be here a little bit more, and then otherwise, Antonio, if you want to say something else, I think like we got to know a little bit more about yourself. It was very interesting because I also could get a taste of what you like to do more in a deeper way. So I would say, yeah, let's wrap it up here. I think the audience or the other viewers who are going to watch this video will have very valuable content. It was like 1.5 hours, and for me, it was like 10 minutes. Time flies by. Um, so, and we have been given a thumbs up. I had to say, like, thanks also to the audience being active for asking questions and for listen all
Yeah.
to all the, especially all the bullshit I've been saying. Antonio was more the guy here. So Antonio, if you want
Yeah.
to wrap it up, or if you want, it's yeah, it's you.
Yeah. I just want to thank everyone that has been here live, or the people that are watching it after on YouTube after this has happened, to spend this time with us talking about our stuff. And I hope that you can find something of this valuable, and that it helps you in your progress in your career or in your life. And as Fernando always says, we can continue these conversations about any of these topics in any of the social networks here on YouTube, on the comments, or even on Twitter in any of the publications. I'm sure that if you have anything left that you want to clarify, or if you have any other interests about how I organize myself, or anything about that, I'm always happy to share my experience with everything I've done. So that's it from my side.
Ah,
And
man,
of course,
just, yeah, wanted to say personally, also thanks to you for giving me the opportunity to interview you, and it
and
was
thank you for accepting it. It was
my
an
God,
honor to be
it was such
interviewed by
an
you.
such an honor, such an honor. So, yeah, okay, let's wrap it up and let's continue again as Antonio pointed out, Twitter on whatever social network. Okay, goodbye everyone. Then.
Bye. Thank you.